You probably have a graveyard somewhere in your life. Maybe it's a dusty guitar in the corner that hasn't been touched in months, a stack of language books you bought with real excitement and barely opened, or a half-finished coding project sitting quietly on your laptop. And every time you notice them, there's a small sting of guilt. Because society has a lot of names for this pattern. They call it flaky. They call it lacking grit. And the most famous one of all, jack of all trades, master of none. The story always sounds the same. You start with intense passion, you consume information obsessively, you feel like this, finally, might be the thing. And then, just when it starts to get serious, the feeling disappears. You get bored, you quit, and you move on to the next shiny interest. After enough cycles like this, something shifts. The curiosity turns inward into self-blame. You start asking yourself questions like, why can't I stick to anything? Why do I always give up? But today, I want to offer you a different perspective, one that's gentler and far more accurate. Because being a dabbler isn't a defect. In fact, it shares the same psychological foundation as something else entirely, a polymath. At the core of your mind is what cognitive scientists call the knowledge instinct, a deep drive to explore, understand, and reduce uncertainty. You are wired for curiosity, for novelty, for learning. The difference between someone who quits early and someone who masters a field is not personality, it's strategy. And more specifically, it's how a certain part of the brain has been trained. To understand why you quit too early, we need to look at a subtle glitch in how your brain experiences learning. When you begin something new, photography, coding, a language, everything is unfamiliar. The learning curve is steep. You go from knowing nothing to knowing something very quickly. And your brain loves that. Researchers call this reward prediction error, the gap between what you expected to learn and how much you actually learned. Early on, that gap is huge. Your brain floods you with dopamine. It feels electric, like falling in love. This is what we might call the novice high. But here's the trap. Eventually, you understand the basics. You know how the camera works. You grasp exposure. The mystery fades. The learning curve flattens, and you enter the plateau. For a brain that's highly sensitive to novelty, this is where dopamine shuts off almost instantly. The energy disappears. Motivation collapses. This is the fork in the road. A master continues through the plateau, searching for deeper patterns. A dabbler exits here. We often label this moment as laziness, but that's not accurate. True laziness is a refusal to act at all. You're not refusing to act. You're refusing to act without fuel. Your brain is experiencing dopamine withdrawal. On a subconscious level, it calculates that the effort required for the final 20% no longer feels worth the reward. So, you stop. But now we need to pause for an honest question. Are you quitting because you've truly learned what you wanted to learn? Or are you quitting because it got uncomfortable? A dabbler quits at the first real obstacle. Their ego takes a hit, and they retreat. That retreat isn't curiosity, it's fear. And the reason fear wins has less to do with character and more with a specific brain muscle that hasn't been trained yet. We talk about grit and willpower as if they're personality traits, something you either have or don't. But neuroscience tells a different story. Tenacity lives in a real physical brain region called the anterior mid-cingulate cortex, or aMCC. You can think of it as a muscle. This region activates when you do something you don't want to do. If the task is enjoyable, it stays quiet. If the task is unpleasant and you persist anyway, it fires. Use it, and it grows. Avoid it, and it weakens. For many dabblers, this muscle has rarely been loaded. Every time boredom or frustration appeared, you stopped. You put the weight down. Over time, the muscle atrophied. Now even a small inconvenience, a difficult chapter, a confusing line of code, feels unbearable. The quit signal activates immediately. That doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're untrained. And the hopeful part is this. The aMCC is plastic. It can grow at any age. Studies of so-called superagers, older adults with exceptional cognitive resilience, show unusually thick aMCCs, not because they were born special, but because they spent a lifetime doing hard things anyway. So how do we train it? Gently. Just like in a real gym, you don't start by lifting the heaviest weight. You use progressive overload. Here's the rule, the 15% push. When you're practicing a skill and that familiar urge to quit appears, don't stop immediately, but also don't force yourself to grind for hours. Just do 15% more. If you plan to read 10 pages and want to quit at 3, read 4, then stop. That tiny act, doing what you didn't want to do, is the rep. That's how the aMCC grows. Over time, that once weak muscle becomes strong enough to carry you through the long, boring plateaus of mastery. That's how a dabbler becomes a master. Now, there's an important exception we need to acknowledge. Some of you watching may have ADHD. For the ADHD brain, dopamine regulation and executive function work differently. Relying on internal willpower alone can backfire, leading to burnout or shame. If that's you, the solution isn't more grit, it's external scaffolding. You need task visualization, breaking tasks into visible steps, time visualization, using timers so tasks don't feel endless, body doubling, working alongside someone else, and gamification, adding artificial rewards to support motivation. This isn't cheating, it's intelligent design. So if you suspect ADHD, support your brain instead of blaming it. There's one final barrier we need to address: boredom intolerance. We live in a world of supernormal stimuli, short videos, constant novelty, effortless dopamine. Compared to that, learning a language or practicing an instrument feels painfully slow. Your brain is calibrated to noise. Boredom isn't a signal to quit, it's the gateway to deep learning. You may need a gentle dopamine reset, reducing background stimulation during practice. Phone in another room, no music, let boredom exist. Boredom is the quiet space where your brain switches from consumption to creation. So here's my proposal: a 6-month challenge. Choose one interest, just one, not forever, just for now. Your goal isn't mastery, it's to reach and stay in the plateau. Feel the drop in dopamine, feel the resistance, and practice the 15% push. Once you prove to yourself that you can stay when it gets uncomfortable, something changes. The old label falls away. You're not a dabbler, you're a polymath in training. Download the free guide in the description. It includes the interest audit and specific protocols to train your aMCC. In the next video, we'll talk about the Polymath strategy, how to design a career that honors multiple interests instead of forcing you to choose just one. I'll see you in the next one.